from the heart of America, the nation's #1 progressive voice, where truth and common sense rule. This is the Ed Schultz Show, where America comes to talk. Now live from the studios at 30 Rock in New York, Ed Schultz.
Killer politics, how big money and bad politics are destroying the great American middle class. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. It's my book. I hope you get it and read it. 1-877-934-6833. The president's getting it from all sides. Can't get it right down in the Gulf, in the eyes of some. Can't create enough jobs. Concerned about energy policy. Now he's got a general that's lipping off. Has any president had as much as this guy? Oh, Eddie, you're just really a cheerleader. I'm just asking the question. 1-877-934-6833. Paul Rieckhoff with us here on the Ed Schultz Show. One fantastic guy, and one guy who has really helped out veterans in his career, head of the IAVA. Paul, good to have you with us.
My pleasure, Ed. Good to talk to you, man.
You bet. What do you make of McChrystal? What's happening here?
Well, I think there's a couple components. One, this is what you get with McChrystal. He speaks his mind. He's not a traditional Washington insider. He does things differently. He comes from the special operations community. So on one level, I'm not really surprised by it. And I think beyond the comments where I know folks are talking about whether or not he should resign, I guess I want to focus on something deeper, which is what I see as a growing disconnect between the White House and the military. And I think it's showing itself in a lot of different ways, and that might be the most important thing we can get from McChrystal's comments, no matter what happens with his personal fate specifically. You know, there's a disconnect here, and I'm seeing it on a lot of levels. I think we're seeing it with Veterans Affairs. I think we saw it with the president not going to Arlington on Memorial Day. There have been folks leaving the White House to go to DOD, and I think it's a growing trend. So I think that's the bigger message to take from this dust-up with McChrystal. Okay, so
President Obama's got some work to do. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we know that he hasn't served in the military personally. He's coming into the White House as an anti-war Democrat, so he's going to have to bridge a gap that exists just from that starting point. And that takes time, and it also takes surrounding himself with the right people and spending a lot of time with the folks in the military. And I think when you hear the comments from McChrystal that are most troubling, I think it's about that disconnect, his feeling that the president doesn't really get it, and he has a hard time around military folks, or he's uncomfortable when he's in a room full of generals. That's the bigger issue that I think we should try to drill down on and be more concerned about.
Do you think he is uncomfortable around military?
I do. I mean, I don't think it's a population that he spent a lot of time with prior to being elected president. He hasn't served in the military himself, and I think that it's something he's got to focus on. He's got to show people that he understands our community. The First Lady has talked a lot about doing work with military families, and there really haven't been many points on the board. And I think the messages they've been putting out there have been bad. I think Memorial Day was one example. The whole country is focused on Arlington, and he's at a different cemetery in Chicago. And then recently the White House was asking for a 1.4% pay increase. If it's approved, that's going to be the smallest pay increase since the volunteer military started in 1973. So they've got to think about the messaging here and the politics of what they're saying to the military beyond what might be happening behind the scenes.
What about his policy in Afghanistan? McChrystal wanted more troops. He got them.
He did, but I don't think there's a lot of clarity on Afghanistan. I don't think the average American understands where we're going. I think folks in the military are consistently concerned that even though he got the troops, we're not really focused on it as a nation, that we haven't really been putting resources against it. But beyond anything else, I don't think there's clarity. I don't think the average American or the average soldier sitting in Afghanistan right now knows what we're doing. And I don't think the president has been focused enough on making sure he communicates that to the American people.
Well, is it the president's war plan or is it McChrystal's war plan? I mean, he's been listening to his generals. They requested funding. He's gone to bat for them. They've requested more troops. He's gone to bat for them. where's the responsibility of the military leaders to bring forth a successful plan to the president?
Look,
and he's got to sign off on it.
The responsibility rests on one man, the commander-in-chief, and I think this is something that we've got to push back on. This was the sort of conversation that developed throughout the Iraq War with the president, with President Bush and Petraeus. The president didn't work for Petraeus, and Obama doesn't work for McChrystal. We all work for Obama. Everybody in the military understands that. He's got to take control, and it's not McChrystal's plan, it's the president's plan. So we've got to always remember that our military is subordinate to civilian command, and ultimately that's the role of the commander-in-chief. That's the heavy weight that he has to bear alone, and that's why I think at the end of the day, success, failure, measurables all fall on the shoulders of one person, and that's the president.
How do you see any way McChrystal can stay on?
I do, to be honest with you. I mean, I think he could take a tongue lashing, but he does bring incredible counterinsurgency experience. He does represent some new thinking, which I think is important to take from this. I mean, he did come from the special operations community. Putting somebody like him in charge of a war like this was a very significant sign. He's not a standard division commander who commanded, a tank battalion. This is a guy who comes from the Green Berets. He comes from the special operations community. So if they do push him out, they're going to have to find someone who can take that momentum and still has that level of understanding and the respect across the military to understand this kind of fight.
Okay, so his comments, though, what would you do if you were President Obama? Here's a guy who decides to go via the media to offer up complaints and concerns, which it's just not constructive in any way, nor is it a sign of discipline. Then he apologizes for it. He has a history of doing this kind of stuff. So when does discipline kick in at the highest level? And what kind of an effect would this have on the troops?
Well, I got to be honest with you here. I mean, I don't know if anything he said is subject to actually get him fired. I mean, it can get you a tongue lashing here, but I don't know if he's crossed any lines. And I haven't seen all the comments, and I'm not, a jag here. But I think, a tongue lashing is definitely warranted here. You don't want him to go to the press. But again, think about what he's saying here. He's saying that the civilian command doesn't get what's going on. He calls James Jones a clown. He says that Biden is out of touch. He says the president feels uncomfortable. So, generals can't just resign all the time. I mean, there may be other ways for them to try to get a message across, and that might be ultimately what he's trying to do here. I don't know, but I think the bigger message we've got to take from McChrystal is that he's feeling frustrated. He's feeling disconnected from the White House, and this is where he chose to put that out. It might not be the best place, but let's look at that deeper message and what that ultimately means for our troops on the ground.
Okay, so Paul Rieckhoff with us here on the Ed Schultz Show, Executive Director and founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I think we disagree on this, Paul, respectfully. I just think that I think he's an educated guy. I think McChrystal should have the wits about him to get face-to-face with the president and say, look, this is what's going down. Instead of going this way, I mean, it shows a lack of respect for the commander-in-chief to put the president in an untenable position like this when he's got a hell of a lot of stuff on his plate. And then the question comes up, are we making progress in Afghanistan?
Yeah, well, let me address the first issue, which is, what he's saying here. Now he's definitely crossed the line here. It's not a smart move. He's definitely going to get a tongue lashing, but maybe he's not getting the presidency here. I know it's hard for the average person to understand, but McChrystal can't just pick up the phone and call the president whenever he wants. And the president has been focused on other things. He's been focused on the economy. He's been focused on BP. And ask yourself how much time you've seen the president in the news focusing on Afghanistan. Not a whole lot lately. So that might also be what McChrystal is trying to communicate to the American people and to the president. He might not have done it in the right way, but I think there's a very important message there that he's trying to convey, which is that he doesn't feel like the White House gets it.
Okay. Paul Rieckhoff, good to have you with us here on the Ed Schultz Show. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Ed. Anytime.
You bet.